Question 1. The performance metrics show a slight decline in a specific subject area over the last 2 academic terms for an applicant to Adrian College, alongside consistent high performance in extracurricular activities and a strong upward trend in a core academic subject. Which approach best reflects a responsible assessment of this applicant's potential for admission? Option A. Recommend a further review of the applicant's file, seeking context for the performance dip in the specific subject area, while considering the overall positive trends and extracurricular achievements to make a holistic judgment. Option B. Recommend immediate rejection due to the decline in the specific subject area, as it indicates a potential academic weakness. Option C. Recommend admission based on the strong performance in the core academic subject, assuming the decline in the other subject is an anomaly that will resolve itself. Option D. Recommend admission, focusing solely on the consistent high performance in extracurriculars and the upward trend in the core subject, disregarding the slight decline. The correct answer is B. Recommend immediate rejection due to the decline in the specific subject area, as it indicates a potential academic weakness. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret complex performance data and make a judgment about its implications for an applicant's suitability for Adrian College. The challenge lies in moving beyond superficial observations to a deeper understanding of what the metrics truly signify in the context of academic potential and the college's admission standards. Careful judgment is required to avoid bias, ensure fairness, and uphold the integrity of the admissions process. The correct approach involves a holistic assessment that considers the performance metrics within a broader context. This means not just looking at raw numbers, but understanding the trends, potential mitigating factors, and how these metrics align with the overall profile of successful Adrian College students. It requires an understanding of the college's mission and values, and how an applicant's performance, even if not stellar in every area, might demonstrate resilience, growth, or unique strengths that contribute to the college community. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes a fair and comprehensive evaluation, avoiding premature conclusions based on isolated data points. It aligns with principles of due diligence and responsible decision-making in an admissions context. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on a single underperforming metric, without further investigation, fails to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of academic achievement and personal development. This could lead to an unfair rejection of a potentially strong candidate who may have faced temporary challenges or whose strengths lie in areas not captured by that single metric. Such an approach risks violating principles of fairness and equity in admissions. Another incorrect approach that overemphasizes a single high-performing metric while ignoring other areas of concern would also be professionally unsound. This could lead to admitting a student who, while excelling in one aspect, may struggle in other critical areas, ultimately impacting their success at Adrian College and potentially the college's academic standards. This approach lacks a balanced perspective and can lead to misjudgments about an applicant's overall readiness. A further incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal biases rather than the presented performance metrics would be a significant ethical and professional failure. Admissions decisions must be based on objective criteria and demonstrable evidence, not subjective impressions or stereotypes. This approach undermines the credibility and fairness of the entire admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured review of all available data, consideration of institutional goals and values, and a commitment to fairness and objectivity. Professionals should be trained to identify potential biases, seek clarification when data is ambiguous, and engage in collaborative decision-making when appropriate. The focus should always be on a comprehensive and equitable evaluation of each applicant's potential to succeed and contribute. Question 2. The audit findings indicate a potential security vulnerability in the system used to store applicant essays for the Adrian College entrance exam, raising concerns about the confidentiality of submitted materials. The admissions committee needs to assess the impact of this vulnerability on the integrity of the admissions process. Option A. Immediately access the compromised system to review all applicant essays to determine if any data has been exfiltrated and to identify specific applicants potentially affected. Option B. Proceed with the admissions decisions as scheduled, assuming the vulnerability did not affect the integrity of the application materials. Option C. Initiate an internal investigation led by the IT department and relevant college officials to assess the nature and extent of the vulnerability and suspend access to the compromised system pending resolution, while informing the admissions committee of the general nature of the findings without revealing specific applicant data. Option D. Publicly disclose the audit findings and the specific nature of the security vulnerability to all applicants to ensure transparency. The correct answer is C. Initiate an internal investigation led by the IT department and relevant college officials to assess the nature and extent of the vulnerability and suspend access to the compromised system pending resolution, while informing the admissions committee of the general nature of the findings without revealing specific applicant data. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and maintain the integrity of the admissions process. The admissions committee is under pressure to make timely decisions, but any action taken must strictly adhere to the Adrian College entrance exam's established guidelines and privacy policies. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the audit findings to understand the scope and nature of the data breach without directly accessing or disseminating the compromised information. This approach prioritizes data security and regulatory compliance by initiating an internal investigation and engaging relevant college authorities. This aligns with the principles of data protection and responsible handling of sensitive information, as mandated by typical university entrance exam regulations, which emphasize confidentiality and due process. The focus is on addressing the systemic issue that led to the breach and ensuring future security, rather than on immediate, potentially unauthorized, access to the compromised data. An incorrect approach would be to directly access the compromised applicant data to identify specific individuals or the extent of the breach. This action would violate privacy regulations and the ethical duty to protect applicant information. It could also lead to accusations of bias or unfair treatment if the information is used in the admissions decision-making process. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the audit findings and proceed with admissions as usual. This failure to acknowledge and address a potential security vulnerability would be a significant ethical lapse and a violation of the college's responsibility to maintain a secure and fair admissions process. It would also expose the college to potential legal and reputational damage. Professionals in this situation should follow a structured decision-making process. First, acknowledge the audit findings and their implications. Second, consult the relevant college policies and procedures regarding data breaches and admissions integrity. Third, escalate the issue to the appropriate administrative bodies, e.g., IT Security Legal Counsel, Admissions Director for guidance and action. Fourth, focus on a systematic investigation and remediation plan rather than immediate, potentially compromising actions. Question 3. Upon reviewing the application materials for the Adrian College entrance exam, an admissions officer realizes that one of the applicant is the child of a close personal friend. The admissions officer has no direct supervisory role over this specific applicant's file, but is part of the broader admissions committee that will ultimately review all applications. What is the most appropriate course of action to uphold the integrity of the entrance exam process? Option A. Inform the applicant's parent, the close personal friend, about the situation and ask for their guidance on how to proceed. Option B. Proceed with the evaluation of the application as usual, believing personal impartiality can be maintained. Option C. Downplay the significance of the personal relationship when discussing the application with other committee members, focusing only on the applicant's academic merits. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the admissions committee and recuse oneself from any discussions or decisions pertaining to this applicant. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the admissions committee and recuse oneself from any discussions or decisions pertaining to this applicant. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure adherence to academic integrity standards, which are paramount in university admissions. The pressure to present a candidate favorably, coupled with the knowledge of a personal connection, necessitates a rigorous and transparent approach to avoid any perception or reality of undue influence. Careful judgment is required to uphold the fairness and credibility of the Adrian College entrance exam process. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the personal relationship to the admissions committee. This action directly addresses the potential conflict of interest by bringing it to the attention of the relevant authorities. By recapping what this approach involves, it means acknowledging the relationship, informing the decision makers, and potentially recusing oneself from any part of the evaluation process that directly involves the applicant. This is ethically justified by the principle of transparency and the duty to avoid conflicts of interest, which are fundamental in academic and professional settings. It ensures that the admissions decision is based solely on the applicant's merits and qualification, free from any bias, whether perceived or actual. This aligns with the core values of fairness and integrity expected in any educational institution's admissions process. An incorrect approach that involves downplaying or omitting the personal relationship is ethically unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of trust and can lead to a compromised admissions decision. It violates the ethical obligation to be truthful and transparent, and it undermines the integrity of the admissions process. Such an omission could be interpreted as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage for the applicant, thereby violating principles of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed with the evaluation without any disclosure, is also professionally unacceptable. This failure ignores the potential for unconscious bias to influence judgment, even if the evaluator believes they can remain impartial. The appearance of impropriety is as damaging as actual impropriety. It violates the ethical imperative to avoid situations that could reasonably be perceived as conflicts of interest, thereby eroding confidence in the admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear framework. 1. Identify potential conflicts of interest. Recognize any personal relationships or circumstances that could influence objective judgment. 2. Disclose proactively. Inform the relevant parties, e.g., admissions committee supervisor, about the potential conflict as soon as it is identified. 3. Seek guidance and recuse if necessary. Follow institutional policies and guidelines regarding conflicts of interest. Be prepared to recuse oneself from any decision-making or evaluation processes that directly involve the individual with whom there is a conflict. 4. Maintain objectivity. Ensure that all decisions are based on established criteria and merit, free from personal bias. 5. Document actions. Keep records of disclosures and any decisions made regarding the conflict. Question 4. Cost-benefit analysis shows that upgrading the campus-wide Wi-Fi infrastructure would significantly improve student access to online learning resources and enhance faculty research capabilities, but at a substantial upfront cost. Alternatively, a less expensive option involves a partial upgrade of the library's physical collection and a modest increase in student support staff, which approach best aligns with the core mission of Adrian College and demonstrates responsible resource stewardship. Option A. Implement a phased approach, starting with minor Wi-Fi improvements and gradually allocating funds to the library and support staff over several years. Option B. Prioritize the comprehensive Wi-Fi infrastructure upgrade, recognizing its foundational role in modern education and research. Option C. Opt for the partial library upgrade and increase support staff, as it offers a more immediate and tangible benefit to a specific student cohort. Option D. Focus on the less expensive option of the library upgrade and support staff to maximize immediate cost savings and demonstrate fiscal prudence. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the comprehensive Wi-Fi infrastructure upgrade, recognizing its foundational role in modern education and research. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in educational institutions where resource allocation decisions must balance immediate needs with long-term strategic goals, all within a framework of ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most impactful and justifiable use of limited funds, ensuring that the chosen path aligns with Adrian College's mission and adheres to any applicable educational standards or funding guidelines. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial cost savings and consider the broader implications for student experience, faculty development, and institutional reputation. The correct approach prioritizes investments that demonstrably enhance the core educational mission and student outcomes, even if they involve higher initial costs. This aligns with the ethical imperative to provide the best possible educational environment and the likely regulatory expectation that institutions should invest in resources that directly benefit students and academic programs. Such an approach reflects a commitment to quality and long-term institutional health, which is often implicitly or explicitly supported by accreditation standards and governing bodies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering the impact on educational quality would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a decline in student satisfaction, faculty morale, and the overall academic standing of Adrian College, potentially violating implicit ethical obligations to stakeholders and possibly contravening guidelines from accrediting bodies that emphasize program effectiveness and student support. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes a less impactful but cheaper alternative, such as superficial upgrades or non-essential amenities, fails to address the core needs of the institution. This demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and a potential disregard for the primary purpose of an educational institution, which is to foster learning and development. Such a decision could be seen as a misallocation of resources, failing to meet the spirit of responsible stewardship, and potentially undermining the college's long-term viability and reputation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a comprehensive assessment of all potential options, considering not only financial implications, but also their alignment with the institution's mission, impact on student learning and well-being, faculty support, and long-term strategic objectives. This often involves stakeholder consultation, thorough research into best practices, and a clear articulation of the rationale behind the final decision, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 5. The assessment process reveals an applicant to the Adrian College entrance exam has a strong extracurricular profile, but a slightly below-average score on a specific standardized section of the exam. The applicant's guardian has also expressed strong enthusiasm for the college's alumni network and potential future philanthropic involvement, considering the established admissions rubric and the principles of fair evaluation, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for the Adrian College entrance exam. Option A. Focus primarily on the applicant's strong extracurricular achievements and the guardian's expressed interest in the college's network, as these indicate potential future value to the institution, and adjust the interpretation of the standardized section score accordingly. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application, including academic transcripts, essays, and all sections of the entrance exam, to determine if the overall profile meets the college's admission standards, while noting the guardian's comments for context, but not allowing them to influence the academic evaluation. Option C. Immediately seek advice from a senior faculty member outside the admissions committee to gauge their opinion on the applicant's potential, given the mixed assessment results, to inform the final decision. Option D. Prioritize the applicant's potential for future financial contribution to Adrian College, as indicated by the guardian's comments, over a strict adherence to the standardized section score, believing this demonstrates a more holistic understanding of student success. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application, including academic transcripts, essays, and all sections of the entrance exam, to determine if the overall profile meets the college's admission standards, while noting the guardian's comments for context, but not allowing them to influence the academic evaluation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic admissions while facing potential pressure to deviate from established procedures. The core of the challenge lies in balancing fairness, integrity, and adherence to Adrian College's stated admissions policies. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the assessment process remains objective and that all applicants are evaluated on their merits, according to the defined criteria. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's entire profile against the established admissions rubric, without allowing external influences or personal biases to sway the evaluation. This upholds the principle of fairness and ensures that the admissions process is transparent and equitable, aligning with the ethical obligations of an admissions officer to act in the best interest of the institution and its commitment to merit-based selection. It directly reflects the regulatory framework of Adrian College's entrance exam, which mandates a standardized and impartial assessment. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a single, potentially misleading, piece of information without considering the broader context would fail to meet the comprehensive assessment requirements. This could lead to an unfair evaluation and potentially admit a student who does not meet the overall academic standards, thereby undermining the integrity of the admissions process. Another incorrect approach that involves seeking to circumvent established procedures or consult with individuals outside the authorized admissions committee to influence the outcome would violate institutional policy and ethical guidelines regarding confidentiality and due process. This introduces bias and compromises the objectivity of the assessment. A third incorrect approach that focuses on the applicant's perceived potential for future financial contribution, rather than their academic qualifications, directly contravenes the stated purpose of an entrance exam, which is to assess academic readiness. This prioritizes an external factor over the core admission criteria, leading to a flawed and potentially discriminatory decision. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the Adrian College entrance exam's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines. This involves meticulously reviewing the applicant's submitted materials against the established admissions rubric, documenting the rationale for each assessment point. If any ambiguities or concerns arise, the professional should consult the official admissions policy or seek guidance from their direct supervisor or the admissions committee, rather than making unilateral decisions or seeking external, unauthorized input. The focus must remain on objective evaluation and adherence to institutional standards. Question 6. Examination of the data shows that Adrian College is considering a new admissions policy designed to increase the diversity of its incoming class. To ensure this policy is implemented effectively and ethically, what is the most appropriate approach for assessing its potential impact? Option A. Focus primarily on projected increases in enrollment numbers and tuition revenue, as these are key indicators of the college's financial health and immediate success. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the policy's effects on academic preparedness, student diversity across various dimensions, and alignment with institutional goals, utilizing both quantitative and qualitative data and engaging relevant stakeholders. Option C. Rely on feedback from current students and faculty regarding their general impressions of diversity on campus to gauge the policy's potential effectiveness. Option D. Implement the new policy immediately and conduct a post-implementation review only if significant issues arise, to avoid delaying the admissions cycle. Correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the policy's effects on academic preparedness, student diversity across various dimensions, and alignment with institutional goals, utilizing both quantitative and qualitative data and engaging relevant stakeholders. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying Adrian College's entrance exam regulations, specifically concerning the impact assessment of a new admissions policy. The difficulty lies in balancing the need for a thorough, data-driven evaluation with the practical constraints of time and resources, while ensuring adherence to the college's established governance and ethical standards for admissions. A hasty or incomplete assessment could lead to unintended negative consequences for prospective students or the college's diversity and academic profile, necessitating careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically analyzes the potential effects of the new admissions policy on various student demographics, academic preparedness, and institutional goals. This aligns with the principles of responsible policy implementation and good governance, which require that significant changes be evaluated for their broader implications before full adoption. By considering both quantitative and qualitative data and engaging relevant stakeholders, this approach ensures that the assessment is robust, fair, and aligned with Adrian College's mission and regulatory framework for admissions. This proactive evaluation is ethically sound, as it seeks to mitigate potential harm and promote equitable access. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on immediate enrollment numbers without considering the broader impact on academic diversity or student success fails to meet the comprehensive evaluation standards expected of an educational institution. This is ethically problematic as it prioritizes short-term metrics over long-term student well-being and institutional integrity. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than systematic data collection and analysis is insufficient for a formal impact assessment. This lacks the rigor required by sound policy evaluation and could lead to biased conclusions, violating principles of fairness and objectivity in admissions. An approach that delays the impact assessment until after the policy has been implemented, or that conducts a superficial review, is a failure of due diligence. This neglects the responsibility to anticipate and address potential negative consequences, potentially exposing the college to regulatory scrutiny or reputational damage, and failing to uphold ethical standards of transparency and accountability in admissions processes. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with admissions policy evaluation should adopt a structured, data-driven approach. This involves clearly defining the scope of the assessment, identifying key performance indicators and potential risks, gathering relevant data from multiple sources, and analyzing this data objectively. Engaging with stakeholders and considering ethical implications are crucial throughout the process. The decision-making framework should prioritize fairness, equity, and the long-term strategic goals of the institution, ensuring that any policy changes are implemented responsibly and with a clear understanding of their potential impact. Question 7. Assessment of the appropriate response by an Adrian College admissions officer when a prospective student's influential parent requests that the student's entrance exam scores be adjusted to ensure admission, citing their significant financial contributions to the college. Option A. Directly adjust the applicant's entrance exam scores upwards to meet the minimum admission threshold, as requested by the parent, to secure the financial contribution. Option B. Postpone a final decision on the applicant's admission indefinitely to avoid addressing the parent's request directly. Option C. Accept the applicant based on the parent's influence and stated financial commitment, bypassing a full review of their academic qualifications. Option D. Conduct a thorough and objective review of the applicant's complete application, including their original entrance exam scores and all other submitted materials, to determine eligibility based solely on Adrian College's published admission criteria, and communicate the decision based on this objective assessment. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough and objective review of the applicant's complete application, including their original entrance exam scores and all other submitted materials, to determine eligibility based solely on Adrian College's published admission criteria, and communicate the decision based on this objective assessment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the integrity of the admissions process. Adrian College, like all educational institutions, is bound by its own internal policies and potentially broader educational accreditation standards that mandate fair and transparent admissions. The challenge lies in balancing the college's commitment to admitting qualified students with the need to uphold ethical standards and prevent any form of academic dishonesty or undue influence. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the admissions process remains equitable and that all applicants are evaluated based on merit and adherence to established criteria. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's qualifications against the stated admission criteria, without any external pressure or preferential treatment. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of fairness, impartiality, and academic integrity that underpin university admissions. Specifically, it adheres to the Adrian College entrance exam's implicit requirement for a merit-based evaluation process, ensuring that all applicants are assessed on their own merits and preparedness, as demonstrated through the prescribed examination and application materials. This approach upholds the college's reputation and the value of its degrees. An incorrect approach that involves directly intervening to alter the applicant's exam results or application materials would constitute a severe breach of academic integrity and ethical conduct. This would violate the core principles of fair assessment and could lead to the admission of an unqualified student, undermining the academic standards of Adrian College. Such an action would also expose the college to potential sanctions from accrediting bodies and damage its reputation. Another incorrect approach, such as accepting the applicant based solely on the parent's influence without independent verification of qualifications, would also be professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a failure to uphold impartiality and would create an unfair advantage for one applicant over others who have met the requirements through their own efforts. It prioritizes external pressure over merit, directly contradicting the purpose of a standardized entrance examination. A third incorrect approach, such as delaying the decision indefinitely to avoid confronting the parent, is also professionally unsound. This passive approach fails to address the ethical dilemma and can create uncertainty for the applicant and the admissions committee. It avoids the responsibility of making a fair and informed decision based on established criteria, potentially leading to a perception of disorganization or a lack of commitment to the admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the college's admission policies and ethical guidelines. When faced with external pressure or unusual circumstances, professionals should 1. Reaffirm the established admission criteria and the importance of objective evaluation. 2. Document all interactions and requests related to the applicant. 3. Consult with relevant internal stakeholders, such as the admissions committee or legal counsel if necessary. 4. Make a decision based solely on the applicant's qualifications and adherence to the established process, communicating the decision clearly and professionally. Question 8. Which approach would be most appropriate for the Adrian College Admissions Committee when evaluating a candidate whose academic record is slightly below the stated minimum for the Adrian College entrance exam, but who demonstrates exceptional leadership potential and has strong recommendations? Option A. Reject the candidate due to their academic record not meeting the explicit minimum requirements of the Adrian College entrance exam, as adherence to stated criteria is paramount. Option B. Admit the candidate based on their exceptional leadership potential and strong recommendations, as these qualities are highly valued by the college, even if academic scores are not fully met. Option C. Seek to informally influence the examination board to adjust the candidate's scores to meet the minimum requirements before a formal review. Option D. Conduct a holistic review of the application, considering academic performance, leadership potential, and recommendations against the overall spirit and intent of the Adrian College entrance exam admissions guidelines, with a clear, documented rationale for any decision. Correct answer is D. Conduct a holistic review of the application, considering academic performance, leadership potential, and recommendations against the overall spirit and intent of the Adrian College entrance exam admissions guidelines, with a clear, documented rationale for any decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Adrian College, as an educational institution, has a responsibility to ensure its admissions process is fair, transparent, and compliant with its own internal policies and any relevant educational regulations. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to admit promising students with the need to adhere to established criteria and avoid any perception of bias or undue influence. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the admissions process. Correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of all applications against the established admissions criteria, documented in the Adrian College entrance exam guidelines. This approach is correct because it prioritizes fairness and consistency, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated on the same basis. It aligns with ethical principles of equal opportunity and regulatory requirements for standardized admissions processes, preventing arbitrary decisions. An approach that prioritizes a candidate's family connections over stated academic qualifications would be ethically flawed and potentially violate institutional policies. This would undermine the meritocratic principles of admissions and could lead to accusations of favoritism, damaging the college's reputation. An approach that focuses solely on a candidate's extracurricular achievements, without considering the core academic requirements outlined in the Adrian College entrance exam guidelines, would also be incorrect. While extracurriculars are valuable, they are typically supplementary to academic performance, and deviating from the primary admission criteria would be a failure to adhere to the established framework. An approach that involves making an exception for a candidate based on a single, exceptional circumstance, without a clear, documented policy for such exceptions would be problematic. This could set a precedent for inconsistent decision-making and open the college to challenges regarding fairness and transparency. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the established policies and criteria for the Adrian College entrance exam. They should then objectively assess each application against these criteria, documenting the rationale for their decisions. If ambiguity or a need for exception arises, the process should involve consultation with relevant committees or supervisors, ensuring that any deviations are well justified, documented, and consistent with the spirit and letter of the college's admissions framework. Question 9. Implementation of a fair and objective admissions process for the Adrian College entrance exam is paramount. If an admissions officer receives an application from an individual with whom they have a personal acquaintance, what is the most ethically and professionally sound approach to ensure the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Immediately recuse oneself from the decision-making process for this applicant and forward the application to another admissions officer without any further involvement. Option B. Grant the applicant preferential consideration due to the personal acquaintance, believing that a slight advantage is justifiable given the relationship. Option C. Conduct a thorough and impartial review of the applicant's qualifications against all established admission criteria, ensuring the decision is based solely on merit and adherence to college policy, regardless of the personal acquaintance. Option D. Inform the applicant that the personal acquaintance will be noted and may influence the review process, but proceed with a standard evaluation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough and impartial review of the applicant's qualifications against all established admission criteria, ensuring the decision is based solely on merit and adherence to college policy, regardless of the personal acquaintance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic admissions while facing potential external pressure. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining fairness, integrity, and adherence to established admission policies in the face of a request that could be perceived as preferential treatment. Careful judgment is required to balance the desire to support a known individual with the overarching responsibility to uphold the integrity of the Adrian College entrance exam process for all applicants. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial review of the applicant's qualifications against the established admission criteria for Adrian College. This means evaluating the applicant solely on their academic merit, extracurricular achievements, and any other factors explicitly outlined in the college's admissions guidelines, without allowing personal connections or external influence to sway the decision. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible, as it upholds the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants and ensures that admissions decisions are based on objective standards, thereby maintaining the credibility and fairness of the Adrian College entrance exam. It aligns with the implicit ethical duty of admissions officers to act in the best interest of the institution and its commitment to academic excellence. An incorrect approach would be to grant preferential treatment to the applicant due to the personal relationship. This would be a direct violation of the principles of fairness and equity that underpin any reputable admissions process. Such an action would undermine the integrity of the Adrian College entrance exam, potentially leading to the admission of less qualified candidates over more deserving ones. This could also expose the college to reputational damage and accusations of bias. Furthermore, it could create a precedent for future undue influence, compromising the long-term fairness of the admission system. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the applicant outright without a proper review, solely because of the personal connection. While avoiding preferential treatment is crucial, completely disregarding an application due to a personal relationship is also unprofessional and potentially unfair. Every applicant deserves a fair and thorough evaluation according to the established criteria. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding and strict adherence to the Adrian College admissions policies and ethical guidelines. When faced with a situation involving a personal connection, the professional should first acknowledge the connection and then consciously commit to an objective evaluation process. This might involve documenting the personal connection and ensuring that the review process is transparent and defensible. If there is any doubt about the ability to remain impartial, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the admissions committee is a crucial step. The ultimate goal is to make a decision that is both fair to the applicant and upholds the integrity of the institution and its entrance examination. Question 10. The efficiency study reveals that certain student support services at Adrian College are operating at a higher cost per student than comparable institutions. The college administration is considering consolidating these services to reduce overhead. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional standards and the college's mission? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of proposed service consolidation, analyzing potential effects on student access, academic success, and overall college experience, and benchmark against best practices in student support before making any decisions. Option B. Prioritize the reduction of services deemed least critical by a small administrative committee without consulting student representatives or conducting an analysis of their importance to student retention and well-being. Option C. Implement minor adjustments to existing services based on informal feedback from a few department heads, without a formal review process, to test the waters before committing to larger changes. Option D. Immediately proceed with consolidating student support services based on the cost per student data to achieve immediate financial savings, assuming that efficiency gains will inherently benefit students. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment of proposed service consolidations, analyzing potential effects on student access, academic success, and overall college experience, and benchmark against best practices in student support before making any decisions. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a potential need for revised student support services at Adrian College. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the college's operational efficiency with its ethical and regulatory obligations to provide adequate support to its student body. Decisions must be grounded in evidence while adhering to established guidelines for student welfare and academic support, ensuring that cost-saving measures do not compromise the quality of education or student success. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential effects of any proposed changes on student outcomes, accessibility, and overall college mission before implementing any revisions. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of educational institutions to prioritize student well-being and academic achievement. Regulatory frameworks governing higher education often mandate that institutions act in the best interest of their students and maintain standards of academic support. A thorough assessment ensures that any efficiency gains are achieved without negatively impacting the student experience or violating these implicit and explicit obligations. An approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without evaluating the downstream effects on student services is professionally unacceptable. This overlooks the ethical imperative to provide a supportive learning environment and may violate implicit promises made to students regarding the resources available to them. Furthermore, such an approach could lead to a decline in student retention and academic performance, ultimately undermining the college's reputation and mission. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes based on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a small group without systematic data collection. This lacks the rigor required for informed decision-making in an educational setting and fails to address the potential for unintended consequences. Professional decision-making in this context requires a systematic process. First, clearly define the problem or opportunity, e.g., improving efficiency. Second, gather relevant data and conduct thorough impact assessments. Third, evaluate potential solutions against established ethical principles and regulatory requirements. And finally, implement the chosen solution with ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Question 11. During the evaluation of an applicant's profile for the Adrian College entrance exam, which approach to presenting their academic and extracurricular experiences would best demonstrate their potential for success and contribution to the college community? Option A. Presenting a comprehensive list of all academic awards, honors, and prestigious extracurricular positions held, emphasizing the high-level recognition achieved. Option B. Highlighting a single, exceptional achievement in a particular field, showcasing a unique talent without necessarily elaborating on its broader implications or connection to other experiences. Option C. Detailing a strong desire for personal advancement and the acquisition of a prestigious degree from Adrian College, focusing on the benefits the applicant will receive. Option D. Articulating how specific academic choices and extracurricular involvements have fostered personal growth, developed key skills, and align with Adrian College's mission and values, demonstrating a clear connection between past experiences and future contributions. The correct answer is D. Articulating how specific academic choices and extracurricular involvements have fostered personal growth, developed key skills, and align with Adrian College's mission and values, demonstrating a clear connection between past experiences and future contributions. Explanation: This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how their academic choices and extracurricular activities align with the values and academic rigor expected by Adrian College. The challenge lies in presenting a coherent narrative that showcases not just achievements, but also the underlying motivations, learning, and growth derived from these experiences, all within the context of the college's stated mission and admission criteria. A successful applicant must go beyond a simple listing of accomplishments and articulate a thoughtful impact assessment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive self-reflection that connects past experiences to future aspirations at Adrian College. This means analyzing how specific academic pursuits, leadership roles, or community involvement have shaped the applicant's skills, knowledge, and character, and then demonstrating how these developed attributes will enable them to contribute meaningfully to the Adrian College community and benefit from its specific programs. This approach is ethically sound as it promotes honesty, self-awareness, and a genuine interest in the institution, aligning with the principle of presenting oneself authentically to an admissions committee. It also reflects a mature understanding of the purpose of higher education, not just as a credential, but as a transformative experience. An approach that focuses solely on listing prestigious achievements without demonstrating personal growth or connection to Adrian College's values is ethically problematic. It can be perceived as an attempt to impress through superficial means rather than genuine suitability, potentially misrepresenting the applicant's true fit. Similarly, an approach that emphasizes a desire for personal gain or status without articulating how this aligns with contributing to the college community fails to demonstrate the reciprocal relationship expected in higher education. It prioritizes the applicant's needs over their potential contributions. An approach that highlights only a single, isolated achievement without contextualizing it within a broader pattern of development or future goals lacks the depth required for a holistic evaluation. It fails to showcase the applicant's capacity for sustained effort, learning, and integration into a new academic environment. Professionals in admissions, and indeed in any evaluative process, should employ a framework that prioritizes evidence of genuine understanding, alignment with institutional goals, and demonstrated potential for growth and contribution. This involves looking beyond surface-level qualifications to assess the applicant's self-awareness, their ability to articulate their motivations, and their capacity to integrate their past experiences into a compelling vision for their future within the institution. The decision-making process should be guided by a commitment to fairness, transparency, and the selection of individuals who will thrive and contribute positively to the academic community. Question 12. System analysis indicates that a prospective student applying to Adrian College's Bachelor of Science in Engineering program has submitted a letter from their high school counselor stating they struggle with timed assessments due to anxiety and requesting extra time on all exams. The student has not provided any formal diagnostic documentation from a medical or psychological professional. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response for Adrian College's admissions committee? Option A. Waive the requirement for timed assessments for this student in the Bachelor of Science in Engineering program, allowing them to complete exams at their own pace to alleviate their anxiety. Option B. Grant the student extra time on all exams for the Bachelor of Science in Engineering program, as a gesture of goodwill and to ensure equitable access to the college. Option C. Inform the student that Adrian College does not provide accommodations for anxiety-related issues, as these are considered personal challenges that students must overcome independently. Option D. Request formal diagnostic documentation from a qualified professional that outlines the specific nature of the student's anxiety and provides concrete recommendations for accommodations, while also explaining that accommodations will be considered based on these recommendations and their alignment with the essential requirements of the engineering program. The correct answer is D. Request formal diagnostic documentation from a qualified professional that outlines the specific nature of the student's anxiety and provides concrete recommendations for accommodations, while also explaining that accommodations will be considered based on these recommendations and their alignment with the essential requirements of the engineering program. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived need for accommodation and the college's obligation to maintain academic integrity and fair assessment standards. Adrian College, like any educational institution, must balance providing equitable access to education with ensuring that all students meet the established learning outcomes and assessment criteria. The pressure to admit students, especially those who may require additional support, can create a complex decision-making environment. Careful judgment is required to uphold both the college's mission and its ethical responsibilities to all students. The correct approach involves a thorough and individualized assessment of the student's needs in relation to the specific academic requirements of the program. This means gathering comprehensive documentation from qualified professionals that clearly outlines the nature of the student's challenges and provides specific, actionable recommendations for accommodations. These recommendations must then be evaluated against the essential functions and learning objectives of the Adrian College program to determine feasibility and appropriateness. The justification for this approach lies in the principles of fairness, equity, and compliance with educational best practices, which emphasize providing reasonable accommodations that do not fundamentally alter the nature of the academic program or lower its standards. This aligns with the ethical imperative to support student success while upholding academic rigor. An incorrect approach would be to grant accommodations based solely on a student's self-reported difficulties or a vague letter from a family member. This fails to establish a clear, evidence-based understanding of the student's needs and the necessary support. It risks compromising academic standards and could lead to unfair advantages for the student, undermining the integrity of the assessment process. Another incorrect approach would be to deny all requests for accommodation without a proper review process, regardless of the supporting documentation provided. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to inclusivity and may violate institutional policies or broader ethical guidelines regarding student support. It fails to recognize that accommodations are designed to level the playing field, not to provide an unfair advantage. A further incorrect approach would be to implement accommodations that fundamentally alter the nature of the course or program, such as waiving essential learning objectives or replacing rigorous assessments with significantly less demanding alternatives. This would undermine the validity of the qualification awarded by Adrian College and would be ethically unsound, as it would misrepresent the student's actual academic achievement. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured multi-step approach. 1. Understand the specific program requirements and learning outcomes. 2. Request and review comprehensive, professional documentation of the student's needs. 3. Consult with relevant academic departments and disability support services. 4. Evaluate proposed accommodations for reasonableness and their impact on academic integrity. 5. Communicate clearly with the student about the decision and the rationale. 6. Maintain a record of the assessment and decision-making process. Question 13. Performance analysis shows that a prospective faculty member is requesting access to anonymized student performance data from a specific course to inform their curriculum development for a similar course they will be teaching at Adrian College. The request is made via email from an institutional email address. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for Adrian College's data protection officer to take in response to this request? Option A. Politely decline the request, citing general data privacy concerns without further investigation. Option B. Initiate a formal verification process to confirm the prospective faculty member's identity, their affiliation with Adrian College, and the specific purpose and scope of their intended use of the data before considering access. Option C. Grant immediate access to the anonymized data, as the request is from an institutional email address and the data is anonymized. Option D. Provide a summary of general student performance trends without providing any specific data points, as a compromise. The correct answer is C. Grant immediate access to the anonymized data, as the request is from an institutional email address and the data is anonymized. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The pressure to provide a quick response, especially in an academic context where timely feedback is valued, can lead to shortcuts that compromise compliance. Careful judgment is required to navigate the potential for unintentional disclosure of confidential information. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Adrian College's data privacy policies and relevant educational record regulations. This approach prioritizes verifying the identity of the inquirer and confirming their legitimate need to access the information before any data is shared. This aligns with the ethical duty of care and the regulatory requirement to safeguard student information, ensuring that access is granted only to authorized individuals for legitimate purposes. This prevents potential breaches of privacy and maintains the integrity of student records. An incorrect approach that involves providing the requested information without proper verification fails to uphold the duty of care and violates privacy regulations. This could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive student data, potentially causing harm to individuals and reputational damage to Adrian College. Another incorrect approach, which is to refuse to provide any information even when the inquirer has a legitimate need and can be verified, is also professionally unsound. While caution is necessary, an outright refusal without exploring verification options can hinder legitimate academic processes and support services. Finally, an approach that relies on assumptions about the inquirer's identity or authorization without explicit confirmation is a direct contravention of data protection principles and institutional policy. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the request and the sensitivity of the information involved. This should be followed by a clear understanding of applicable policies and regulations. The next step is to implement a robust verification process to confirm the inquirer's identity and authorization. If verification is successful and the inquirer has a legitimate need, the information should be provided in a secure and compliant manner. If verification fails or the need is not legitimate, the request should be politely but firmly declined, with an explanation of the policy. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of unusually high scores from a specific geographic region, alongside an increase in inquiries about exam content from the same area in the weeks leading up to the test. Option A. Dismiss the anomalies as statistical outliers and continue with the admissions process as planned. Option B. Initiate a thorough internal review to investigate the nature and extent of the anomalies, cross-referencing inquiry data with exam performance metrics and consulting relevant college policies on academic integrity. Option C. Report the findings directly to external examination regulatory bodies without any internal investigation. Option D. Immediately disqualify all candidates from the identified geographic region to maintain the integrity of the exam. The correct answer is B. Initiate a thorough internal review to investigate the nature and extent of the anomalies, cross-referencing inquiry data with exam performance metrics, and consulting relevant college policies on academic integrity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret complex data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about potential risks to the college's reputation and operational integrity. The challenge lies in distinguishing between minor anomalies and significant indicators of non-compliance or ethical breaches, necessitating a nuanced understanding of the Adrian College entrance exam's specific regulatory framework and guiding principles. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreaction or underestimation of potential issues. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of the identified anomalies. This means thoroughly investigating the nature, frequency, and potential impact of each observed deviation from expected patterns. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of due diligence, which mandates that individuals act responsibly and proactively to identify and mitigate risks. Specifically, within the context of an entrance exam, this approach aligns with the ethical obligation to ensure fairness, integrity, and the credibility of the admissions process. It also reflects the regulatory requirement to maintain robust internal controls and reporting mechanisms to safeguard the college's academic standards and reputation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate disciplinary action without thorough investigation fails to uphold the principles of fairness and due process. It risks penalizing individuals based on incomplete information and could lead to reputational damage for the college if the initial assessment proves inaccurate. This approach neglects the regulatory imperative to gather sufficient evidence before making significant decisions. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the anomalies due to their perceived minor nature, represents a failure of risk management and a potential breach of ethical duty. This passive stance could allow significant issues to escalate undetected, compromising the integrity of the exam and potentially leading to more severe consequences for the college down the line. It demonstrates a lack of proactive engagement with potential risks, which is contrary to the expectations of responsible oversight. A third incorrect approach, which involves immediately escalating the issue to external authorities without internal assessment, bypasses the college's established internal procedures for handling such matters. While external reporting may be necessary in certain circumstances, it should typically follow an initial internal review to determine the scope and severity of the issue. This premature escalation can be disruptive and may not be the most efficient or appropriate first step, potentially undermining internal governance structures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This typically includes identifying potential risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, developing mitigation strategies, implementing controls, and monitoring their effectiveness. In this context, it means first understanding the specific rules and guidelines of the Adrian College entrance exam, then analyzing the data from the monitoring system to identify deviations, evaluating the potential implications of these deviations, and finally, determining the most appropriate course of action based on the evidence and established protocols. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates an unusual pattern of access requests to student academic records from an IP address not typically associated with authorized personnel. This pattern has occurred intermittently over the past week. What is the most appropriate initial step to assess the potential risk? Option A. Immediately flag the activity as a potential security breach and initiate a formal investigation. Option B. Review the college's IT security policies and cross-reference the IP address with known authorized devices or user accounts. Option C. Contact the IT department to disable the IP address immediately to prevent further access. Option D. Ignore the pattern as it is intermittent and may be a system glitch. The correct answer is A. Immediately flag the activity as a potential security breach and initiate a formal investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about potential risks to the college's reputation and operational integrity. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between minor anomalies and significant indicators of a breach or policy violation, necessitating a nuanced understanding of the college's internal policies and relevant external regulations, even if not explicitly stated as a formal regulatory framework for this entrance exam. The Adrian College entrance exam, in its context, implies a focus on responsible academic and administrative conduct. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of the identified anomalies. This means not jumping to conclusions, but rather gathering more information to understand the context and potential impact of the observed patterns. This aligns with principles of due diligence and responsible risk management, which are implicitly expected in an academic institution. The ethical imperative is to act with fairness and accuracy, avoiding hasty judgments that could unfairly penalize individuals or misrepresent the situation. An approach that immediately escalates the situation without further investigation is procedurally flawed. It bypasses the necessary steps of fact-finding and verification, potentially leading to unnecessary alarm and disruption. This could be seen as a failure of due process and a lack of professional discretion. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the anomalies entirely without any form of review. This demonstrates a lack of vigilance and a potential disregard for the college's commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant environment. It fails to uphold the responsibility to identify and address potential issues proactively. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of the monitoring system without considering the broader implications for students, staff, or the college's mission would be incomplete. Risk assessment requires a holistic view, integrating technical data with an understanding of human behavior and institutional values. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes information gathering, objective analysis, and proportionate response. This involves 1. Acknowledging the data presented by the monitoring system. 2. Seeking to understand the context and nature of the anomalies. 3. Consulting relevant college policies or guidelines. 4. Determining the potential impact and severity of the observed patterns. 5. Escalating or taking action only when sufficient evidence warrants it, and doing so through appropriate channels. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a slight but consistent deviation in the average response times for a specific section of the Adrian College entrance exam across a small cohort of applicants. This deviation is not statistically significant enough to trigger automated alerts, but is noticeable upon manual review. What is the most appropriate initial course of action? Option A. Contact the affected applicants directly to inquire about their experience with the exam section and any difficulties they encountered. Option B. Ignore the deviation as it falls below the threshold for automated alerts and is not statistically significant. Option C. Immediately flag the cohort for potential academic misconduct and suspend their exam results pending further investigation. Option D. Initiate a review of the examination procedures for that specific section to identify any potential ambiguities or technical issues that might explain the observed response times. The correct answer is D. Initiate a review of the examination procedures for that specific section to identify any potential ambiguities or technical issues that might explain the observed response times. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about potential risks to the college's reputation and operational integrity. The challenge lies in distinguishing between minor anomalies and significant indicators of noncompliance or misconduct, necessitating a nuanced understanding of the Adrian College entrance exam's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreacting to insignificant events, or, conversely, underestimating potential threats. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of the observed anomalies. This means gathering more information to understand the context and potential causes of the deviations before concluding that a breach has occurred. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and fair process, ensuring that any actions taken are proportionate and justified by concrete evidence. It also reflects the ethical obligation to act responsibly and avoid making unsubstantiated accusations. An approach that immediately assumes a breach and initiates disciplinary action without further investigation is procedurally unfair and potentially damaging to individuals' reputations. It fails to adhere to the principle of natural justice, which requires a thorough examination of facts before judgment. Furthermore, it could lead to unnecessary escalation and resource expenditure if the anomalies are later found to be benign. An approach that dismisses the anomalies without any attempt to understand their origin or potential implications is negligent. It risks overlooking genuine risks to the integrity of the entrance exam process, which could have severe consequences for Adrian College, including reputational damage and potential regulatory sanctions if the exam's integrity is compromised. This approach fails to uphold the duty of care expected of those responsible for overseeing the exam. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a tiered approach. First, observe and record. Second, investigate and gather context. Third, assess risk based on evidence. And finally, act proportionately based on the assessed risk, always in accordance with established policies and ethical standards. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, fair, and aligned with the overarching goals of maintaining the integrity and reputation of the institution. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates a series of unusual patterns in applicant data submissions for the Adrian College entrance exam, including several instances of identical essay content from different applicants and a statistically improbable number of late submissions from a specific geographic region. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial risk assessment approach? Option A. Dismiss the identical essay content as a result of shared study materials and attribute the late submissions to localized technical difficulties without further inquiry. Option B. Report the anomalies to the admissions committee as minor data fluctuations that do not warrant immediate concern. Option C. Initiate a detailed investigation into the nature and extent of the identical essay content and the late submissions, cross-referencing with historical data and established submission protocols to identify potential systemic issues or individual misconduct. Option D. Immediately flag all applicants associated with the identical essay content and late submissions for potential disqualification pending further review. The correct answer is D. Immediately flag all applicants associated with the identical essay content and late submissions for potential disqualification pending further review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about potential risks to the college's reputation and operational integrity. The challenge lies in distinguishing between minor anomalies and significant indicators of non-compliance or ethical breaches, all within the context of Adrian College's specific entrance exam regulations and ethical guidelines. A careful, nuanced approach is required to avoid overreaction or underestimation of potential issues. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of the identified anomalies. This means not jumping to conclusions, but rather gathering further information to understand the context and potential impact of each anomaly. It aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible risk management, which are implicitly expected of individuals involved in the administration and oversight of university entrance examinations. Specifically, it reflects a commitment to upholding the integrity of the examination process, ensuring fairness to all applicants, and protecting the college's standing. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes a thorough and objective evaluation before any action is taken, preventing undue suspicion or penalty. An incorrect approach that immediately assumes misconduct without further investigation fails to adhere to principles of fairness and due process, could lead to unwarranted accusations and damage to the reputation of individuals or the college itself. Another incorrect approach that dismisses all anomalies as insignificant, even when they suggest a pattern or a deviation from expected norms, risks overlooking genuine issues that could compromise the integrity of the entrance exam or lead to future problems. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to proactively manage risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with objective data analysis, followed by information gathering to contextualize the data. This should then lead to an assessment of potential risks and the development of appropriate mitigation strategies, always in alignment with the Adrian College entrance exam's specific regulatory framework and ethical guidelines. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, fair, and defensible. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the potential risks associated with admitting a candidate to Adrian College. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a comprehensive and ethically sound risk assessment for university entrance exams? Option A. A quantitative analysis solely based on the applicant's previous academic grades and standardized test scores, assuming these are the sole predictors of future success. Option B. A qualitative assessment of the applicant's overall profile, considering academic potential, personal circumstances, and the college's support systems to identify potential challenges and areas where the applicant might thrive. Option C. A reliance on an intuitive judgment of the applicant's fit for the college, without a structured framework or consideration of specific risk factors. Option D. A subjective evaluation based on the applicant's perceived social influence and the number of extracurricular activities they have participated in, regardless of their academic standing. The correct answer is B. A qualitative assessment of the applicant's overall profile, considering academic potential, personal circumstances, and the college's support systems to identify potential challenges and areas where the applicant might thrive. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of risk assessment principles as applied to university admissions, specifically within the context of the Adrian College entrance exam's regulatory framework. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate methodology for evaluating potential risks associated with an applicant's profile, ensuring fairness, and adhering to the college's stated admissions criteria and any implicit or explicit guidelines governing the entrance exam process. The college's commitment to a robust and ethical admissions process necessitates a risk assessment approach that is both comprehensive and defensible. The correct approach involves a qualitative assessment of an applicant's potential to succeed academically and contribute positively to the college community, considering a broad range of factors beyond just standardized test scores. This aligns with the ethical imperative to evaluate applicants holistically and the likely regulatory expectation for admissions processes to be fair and non-discriminatory. Such an approach allows for the identification of potential challenges an applicant might face and the college's capacity to support them, thereby mitigating risks to both the student and the institution. It reflects a commitment to understanding the individual applicant's circumstances and potential, rather than relying on a single, potentially insufficient metric. An approach that solely focuses on historical academic performance without considering other contextual factors would be incorrect. This fails to acknowledge that past performance is not always indicative of future success, especially when external circumstances may have played a role. It also risks overlooking promising candidates who may have overcome significant obstacles. An approach that prioritizes the applicant's perceived social status or extracurricular popularity over academic potential would be ethically unsound and likely violate admissions regulations. Admissions should be based on merit and potential for academic success, not on superficial or potentially biased criteria. An approach that relies on a subjective gut feeling about an applicant's suitability without a structured framework for evaluation would be professionally unacceptable. This lacks objectivity, is prone to bias, and cannot be easily justified or defended, potentially leading to unfair admissions decisions and regulatory scrutiny. Professionals involved in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defined admissions criteria, followed by a structured evaluation process that incorporates multiple data points. This process should include a qualitative risk assessment component that considers the applicant's background, potential challenges, and the college's resources for support. Transparency and consistency in applying these criteria are paramount to ensure fairness and compliance with any governing regulations. Question 19. Investigation of an applicant's academic record for the Adrian College entrance exam reveals a discrepancy that may impact their eligibility. What is the most appropriate initial step to address this discrepancy while adhering to professional standards and institutional guidelines? Option A. Consult the official Adrian College admissions policy manual to understand the established procedure for handling applicant record discrepancies. Option B. Attempt to contact the applicant directly to inquire about the discrepancy and request further explanation. Option C. Directly contact the admissions office to request clarification and access to any supporting documentation related to the applicant's record. Option D. Discuss the discrepancy with a colleague in a different department to gather informal opinions on how to proceed. The correct answer is C. Directly contact the admissions office to request clarification and access to any supporting documentation related to the applicant's record. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The Adrian College entrance exam context implies a need for adherence to educational institution policies and potentially data privacy regulations relevant to student admissions. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the pursuit of information does not lead to a breach of trust or regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach involves a structured, authorized process for obtaining necessary information. This typically means consulting official college policies regarding admissions data access and utilizing designated channels for information requests. This aligns with professional ethical standards that prioritize data integrity and authorized access, and it adheres to any applicable institutional guidelines or privacy policies that govern how applicant information can be handled and reviewed. An incorrect approach that involves directly contacting admissions officers without following established protocols is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the formal review and approval processes, potentially leading to unauthorized disclosure of sensitive applicant information or creating an unfair advantage. It violates the principle of due process in admissions and could contravene institutional policies designed to maintain fairness and confidentiality. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to access applicant files through unofficial means or by leveraging personal connections within the college, is also professionally unsound. This constitutes a serious breach of confidentiality and ethical conduct. It undermines the integrity of the admissions process and could lead to severe disciplinary action, including the invalidation of admissions decisions and potential legal repercussions for violating privacy laws or institutional regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve first identifying the specific information needed and the legitimate purpose for its acquisition. Next, one must consult relevant institutional policies and procedures for data access. If direct access is not permitted, the appropriate course of action is to submit a formal request through the designated channels, clearly stating the purpose and adhering to any required authorization steps. This systematic approach ensures that information is obtained ethically, legally, and in a manner that upholds the integrity of the institution and its processes. Question 20. Benchmark analysis indicates that Adrian College's admissions process, while historically successful, could benefit from a more forward-looking risk assessment framework. Considering the college's commitment to academic excellence and student success, which of the following approaches would best enhance the proactive identification and mitigation of potential risks within the admissions cycle? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive review of the entire admissions process, from application submission to enrollment, to identify systemic vulnerabilities and potential points of failure that could impact the college's reputation or the quality of its student body. Option B. Relying primarily on the historical performance of admitted students to gauge the effectiveness of current admissions criteria without exploring new potential risk factors. Option C. Focusing on streamlining the application review to increase the number of applications processed per admissions officer, thereby improving efficiency. Option D. Analyzing past admissions cycles to identify any previously encountered issues and developing protocols to address those specific problems if they recur. The correct answer is A. Conducting a comprehensive review of the entire admissions process, from application submission to enrollment, to identify systemic vulnerabilities and potential points of failure that could impact the college's reputation or the quality of its student body. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how to proactively identify and mitigate potential risks in an academic admissions context, specifically for Adrian College. The challenge lies in moving beyond simply meeting minimum requirements to anticipating future issues that could impact the college's integrity and the applicant pool. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial risk identification and a robust, forward-thinking approach. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the admissions process, looking for systemic weaknesses and potential vulnerabilities that could lead to negative outcomes, such as admitting unqualified students or facing reputational damage. This approach is right because it aligns with the ethical duty of admissions professionals to uphold the standards and reputation of the institution. It demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and risk management, which are crucial for maintaining the integrity of the admissions process and ensuring the college admits students who are likely to succeed and contribute positively. This proactive stance is implicitly supported by best practices in institutional governance and quality assurance, which are foundational to any reputable educational institution. An approach that focuses solely on historical data without considering future trends or emerging risks is incorrect. This failure stems from a lack of foresight and an inability to adapt to a changing landscape, potentially leaving the college exposed to new forms of risk. Another incorrect approach is to only address risks that have already materialized. This reactive stance is insufficient for effective risk management, as it fails to prevent future problems and suggests a lack of proactive planning. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed and volume of applications over thoroughness and risk assessment is fundamentally flawed. This prioritizes short-term efficiency over long-term institutional health and integrity, violating the ethical obligation to ensure a fair and rigorous admissions process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the college's mission and strategic goals. This is followed by identifying potential risks across all stages of the admissions process, from application generation to enrollment. For each identified risk, an assessment of its likelihood and potential impact should be made. Subsequently, strategies for mitigation and contingency planning should be developed. Regular review and adaptation of the risk assessment process are essential to ensure its continued relevance and effectiveness.